Welcome, ladies and gentlemen, to the CIMA strategic case study pre-scene summary with the complete commentary, segment number 2. In the first segment, we looked at what our role that has been assigned by the strategic case study examiner is. We looked at Adviland, we looked at in general, we learned about the science and technology park industry, and we also learned about the tenants, what the tenants' expectations are, and we looked at this particular business from the tenant's perspective. Now, in this segment, we will be specifically focusing on all the pre-scene information available on our own company, KCTP, or Knowledge City Technology Park. So this entire segment, I want you to think like you own the business, you lead the business, you run the business, you are in charge of the financing of the business, you are in charge of the investment decisions related to the business, and of course, you are in charge of the dividend payout and the dividend policy decision of the business as well. Let's have a look. Knowledge City Technology Park. So to start with, I want to remind you that we have to always assume that we are KCTP. So please think like KCTP management and agents of ownership. So we are the agent, the shareholders are the principals. We represent their interests. And I have just appointed you Senior Finance Manager for KCTP, reporting to the entire board. So the pre-scene says that the KCTP is a quoted company, which means that it is established and fulfills listing requirements indicating well-managed and precision operations, because obviously it would be very tough to become a listed entity in a well-regulated stock exchange. And it also says that KCTP is the largest technology park in the country, so in Adviland, which means that we are most likely the market leader of the entire industry of STPs, or Science and Technology Parks, in Adviland. Next, let's focus on location and geographical elements, indicative of highly strategically beneficial location, almost non-existent negatives. So the pre-scene tells us that KCTP is located close to CCU, and CCU is a campus of a leading technology university itself. So proximity and the knowledge association is a critical success factor for any STP, and in this case for KCTP definitely. And in addition to that, the park is not directly affiliated, so not officially attached or connected to the university. So this detachment means that KCTP is independently managed of CCU. What are the positives? What are the negatives? And you can definitely incorporate the idea associated with having a board member representing CCU's interests as well. Because even though they say not directly affiliated, then indirectly affiliated. How so? That's a question that should make us think further. It is located within 1 hour drive of several other major universities, which is a positive. KCTP campus is located within a 30-minute drive from Capital City University. KCTP campus is also 3 miles from Capital City International Airport. And there are several large hotels within a short distance of KCTP for visitors, clients, tenants, and colleague accommodations, convenient venues for meetings and conferences. So these hotels serve many purposes. So on a positive note with this, there is additional strategic benefit and collaboration opportunities created, long-term deals, reputational associations, and other value additions in leisure and training space linked to the hotels can be thought of. And there are also several other universities within a comfortable traveling distance of KCTP. So all these indicate that the location and geography of KCTP is highly strategically beneficial. Then we learn about the infrastructure of the campus. It's 24 hectares of pleasant landscape grounds, which means it's quite large. There are 18 buildings varying in size from 17,000 to 18,500 square meters, which indicates with the industry specifications scalable variety that can be created within the park. There are 320,000 square meters of floor space, because it is the largest in Adviland indicates very large size. Next we move to history, flotation and ownership. KCTP was founded in 1986, which means it is a long incumbent in this industry during the era of the general global boom of STPs around the world, because it was noted in my research, even though Silicon Valley and the Palo Alto Stanford University centric research park started in 1950s, 1956 to be precise, and the subsequent boom of it, the concept of STPs really blew out of proportion back in the late 80s. By Adviland's capital city university, it was initiated. So CCU played a major role, which indicates that this is a higher institute of education initiated STP. There is always going to be a cultural impact and rituals brought forward because of this particular initiation or the origin of the STP itself. So things to think about, and you might even be able to incorporate some of these behaviors if you see an opportunity in the unseen. This was floated in 1999, so we see a 13-year gap from 86 to 1999, which indicates a healthy timeline prior to listing, indicates good management and track record up to the flotation point. CCU owns 20%. There could be positives and negatives both to think about, and CCU also retains influential voting power. Right? You can ignore this word. CCU does retain influential voting power. Flotation was motivated by CCU's desire to raise funds and to free KCTP to provide a sustainable commercial boost to A's tech sector and Adviland's tech sector. So there is always that commercial motive overriding academia. And we also noticed, as we go further, we also notice that some tenants have shifted from the academic aspect to commercial aspect. So there is always that as a strong desire of institutions, entities to be driven by the commercial motive, which we see down the line for KCTP as well. Next, we look at what has happened since then up to now. Currently, we employ 970 direct staff, which is a very large workforce and makes HR all the more critical. So within the scope of HR, there is staff management, satisfaction, payroll, promotions, growth, training, etc. to take care of. So HR, we have a director who is in charge of HR as well. So that is a critical aspect, and managing the behavioral aspect and the cultural impact of the people itself is a important trait when it comes to the strategic case study competencies that directly falls under the purview of leadership. Secondly, infrastructure has improved significantly, the pre-scene says, which indicates a successful journey with continued capex and investments. KCTP has achieved very high occupancy rates, which indicates of positive reputation and image to attract and retain tenants continuously. This need to be strategically maintained while ensuring forward-looking strategy for capacity scaling needs. So given that we have high occupancy, but if we have to increase the capacity, we also need to be in a position to be able to do that. Most tenants remain at KCTP for at least 2 years, while some tenants have occupied buildings for longer than 10 years. So it indicates that we have a wide variety, a mix of tenants, some short-term tenants, some we call these tenants who prefer to stay anchored to one location for long durations. We call them anchor tenants. So we do have some anchor tenants. Management of tenant portfolio and projection of tenant anchoring is required. What is the optimal mix of small to medium to anchor tenants, etc.? These are questions that we should be thinking about, especially when we look at aspects like cash flow management and profitability management. Must ensure profitability of KCTP is always maintained at optimal levels, which is our primary agency responsibility. Next, we get a view on the vision, mission, and the values. The vision of KCTP is to contribute to innovation in business. So it is a very wide and aspirational vision. The achievement level is unknown, and I was also thinking what the link to Adviland government is, because Innovation is always something that is backed by the power of government. If you look at most practical examples, practically STPs, which in their evolution, in their growth, become innovation clusters and then even grow on to become regional innovation clusters. So that is one aspect that I was thinking about, and that government relationship can also be a simple factor that can lead to a variant. Mission: to offer an open, strategic platform for the development of innovation, technology and enterprise. So expanding on this, when they say open, does it mean that it's open for all? Is equality playing a role here? Is diversity playing a role here? These are things to think about. Strategic is a wide definition, means all aspects needed for a tenant. Does that offer all the aspects, all the strategic expectations of a tenant? Can a tenant expect to come and anchor themselves at KCTP, and the platform that KCTP offers, will it be strategically viable in all angles? Moving further, strategic platform for the development of innovation. We don't know the extent to which innovation has been supported. Technology examples indicate fair levels of achievement. We have several incident examples of what has happened at KCTP. And enterprise, tenant-based business models, well detailed in the pre-scene. So as we go forward, we see little evidence for each of these aspects of the mission statement. Then KCTP has 5 values. Number 1 is innovation, number 2 is community, 3 integrity, 4 flexibility, and 5 responsiveness. Innovation is to find new ways to help businesses grow, which indicates the core business of KCTP. Community is to forge links between business and academia. Again, it's a highly dependent CSF and brings the exemplary element is that close connection to CCU, the capital city university. So the business is the KCTP end of things. Academia, not only CCU, but all the other universities that KCTP has some connection with. Integrity, we apply a high level of professional ethics to everything that we do. So the ethics of the business is very clearly stated as a fundamental value. Flexibility, to work with shareholders to create workable solutions. Collaborative and problem-solving mindset is needed by management. And finally, responsiveness, to meet our stakeholder needs. So in this value, KCTP is being considerate for all stakeholders, internal, external, power independent stakeholders, public stakeholders, private stakeholders, academia, and other commercially interested stakeholders as well. That responsiveness aspect is also stressed in its values. Right. Next, we look at KCTP, its tenants and universities. So what are the elements within the pre-scene that provide us a view on KCTP's tenants mainly and their relationships with universities, CCU and other. KCTP has an international reputation for excellence in several areas such as biotechnology and engineering material. So reputation management is critical and also increases the perceived risk. And when you think about biotechnology and engineering material, it is very unlikely that you can progress forward without the support of universities and various academic institutions that dive deep into this kind of research. Has a close working relationship with CCU, not affiliated, because they had said not directly affiliated, but close relationship. We need to understand the extent of this relationship. This is all they have provided, which triggers us the thought, but we don't know the answers, so we need to be wary about it. Has developed good relationships with many of KCTP's tenants. The community value within the park is facilitated well. So good relationships are promoted. Some tenants decided to base themselves at KCTP in order to develop contact with leading academics at CCU. So apparently, the CCU association is clearly leading to commercial benefits and also boosting the brand image. Has even led to commercial funding of CCU research projects. It's value-added auxiliary but expected benefit, the funding aspect. Large number of work experience opportunities for CCU graduates have arisen. So CCU graduates benefiting, the community value is furthered. If you remember, there is a value called community, and do they contribute to innovation and ideation itself? They could. Also, employment opportunities. So there are work experience opportunities like internships, etc., research assistant, etc. But there are also employment opportunities themselves. This is also one of the expected benefits of a higher institute of education initiating STP, fulfilled sufficiently, it seems. Many tenants who were previously academics at CCU have now shifted to applied research with fully commercial objectives. So see, as a company, as a STP, they enable academia plus commercial integrations or movements or shifts between each other even. And that is a really positive thing. Other universities, the board is keen to develop as many potentially useful academic links as possible. So the board identifies the criticality of networking. And when you go through the practical research related aspects, you will notice that continuously various learned members of this space stress the importance of networking. And even at KCTP, the board is keen to develop as many potentially useful academic links. Historically, many KCTP tenants have successfully collaborated with KCTP tenants and universities other than CCU. So there is a positive track record historically, and we need to reinforce, capitalize on further opportunities and maintain that momentum. Universities in general host academic conferences at the hotels, partly also to attract participants from KCTP's tenants to develop potentially mutually beneficial contacts. So one of the things that I noticed, right, host academic conferences, when I also did the research, is that conferences are key in the innovation space to attract talent, entities, and investors. Ideally, it's an opportunity to attract all the key stakeholders to a positive environment, so relationships can be built and collaboration can add value to the business overall. Reputation is also a key contributing factor that is supported by hosting academic conferences and creating that opportunity for people to meet simply. Next, we get a very quick view of competition in Adviland. We know that there are 27 tech parks, several major competitors, including SciPark. So do remember SciPark. It is located approximately 15 miles from KCTP, so not very far, and can they eat into KCTP potential? And campus of similar size to KCTP campus indicates similar dynamics and capability, but overall very limited view on operations. All we can do is we can refer to the financials for some additional perspective, which you will do with respect to SciPark's numbers in the financials review as well. Next, we move to the operations and the management functions of KCTP. The pre-scene generalizes some of the operations and also provides us an exclusive list of operations that are running live 24/7 on a real-time basis. So the 24-hour functions, which are critically live functions, obviously for a KCTP kind of business: health and safety, security, maintenance with emergency cover, information technology, reception and telephony services. The general functions are administration and legal, marketing, internal audit, landscaping and gardening, and KCTP business services. Now, do remember that we have an internal audit function, which means we will have an internal audit charter. We do have the audit committee. All of these are very important indicators to corporate governance aspect as well. So with respect to landscaping and gardening, it is important and can be an active critical success factor for tenant attraction, because tenants usually expect a pleasant space, especially entities that like to treat their employees in the best possible way, providing the best levels of quality. We know there are so many companies that offer that. So in such a situation, the landscaping and the gardening can actually be a critical function. If you look at businesses, especially like I know very active property based spaces like hotel businesses or even golf, right? We know that the landscaping and the gardening aspect of things is highly critical for that business, and it can be for a business like KCTP, which is a massive geographical chunk. So KCTP Business Services, value added but not uncommon in STPs. Segmental view could provide more information on contribution from KCTP Business Services. So it is value added and not uncommon because many STPs around the world also with their service set of offering space offer business services, and within the business services there is so much room to expand, so much of room to take the weight of or the load of tenants who want to really focus only on their research. If KCTP as a entity, as a business, if the business services segment of KCTP can really understand their tenant requirements, this can be a real money earner. Moving on, the KCTP's campus and its composition. So KCTP is a major hub offering global connections, which is a positive factor, enables KCTP's tenants to maintain close contact with business contacts and colleagues from all around the world. It is a major positive because we've already established how important networking is. It is purpose built with excellent connection to utilities like water, electricity and data, with scope to be upgraded if needed. In theory, KCTP apparently can meet the needs of a small town with ample provision for tenants' foreseeable needs. This seems to be a major strength. It is purpose built. We've already established that strength is a key factor for the design and the buildings themselves, right? Including all the research that has to be done. When you look at all that risk associated, purpose built is excellent. It is a major strength and indicates that the management so far have done significantly well. So they understand the STP business very well. The management related stakeholder relationships seem to be extremely well managed. So all these indicate that in the planning and in the conceptualizing and in the development of KCTP and in its journey so far of expansion, KCTP has done really well. Maintains the grounds to a high standard, reinforces the pleasantness factor. So this is why I told earlier that landscaping and gardening can actually be a critical success factor for a business, especially in terms of tenant attraction. And KCTP seems to be doing an excellent job there. If we dive into the detailed composition image, a snapshot has been created for easy perusal. Indicates carefully determined distribution of space with high levels of flexibility and careful expansion aspirations. Let's see how. So there seems to be 18 buildings. Out of the 18 buildings, 15 of the buildings are for sole occupancy to individual tenants, whereas 2 of the buildings are smaller entities with modest needs than sole occupancy. So first I'd like to focus on the commercial buildings, the 17 buildings that have been clearly segregated and committed to tenant occupancy. So the large units infrastructurally have all the necessary cabling and the connections. The utilities, electricity, data, telephone, water can be made available in any part of the buildings. Tenants are free to adapt and change the interior as they wish. So we clearly see a lot of flexibility and high levels of offerings, and that stability that tenants are looking for has been considered and incorporated within the large units. The 2 buildings for smaller entities are subdivided into smaller workspaces, which means these 2 buildings, some of the tenants are at early stages of development and don't have the necessary funding for scale, and the rest do not need large spaces or heavy equipment but prefer association with KCTP. So we clearly see that KCTP's reputation attracting and retaining smaller tenants, even if they are small, they might be of high potential, and they might be looking for all the other additional benefits like the networking benefit, the close proximity to CCU, and the ease of services from that end, the ease of accessibility, all of that kicking in, where KCTP's reputation is attracting and retaining tenants. One of the buildings, that one remaining building, is for KCTP, and it is located beside the visitors entrance and the car park, because whoever visits KCTP can very easily access this building, which must be the central location and which is the central hub from which KCTP's the entire space, the entire landmark is managed. So this building has a reception desk staffed on a 24-hour basis, a telephone switchboard that enables operators to answer calls on behalf of tenants, which is a value-added service. Offices and workspaces for administrative and facility staff is in the building. It has a sophisticated security operations room that monitors the grounds remotely and communicates with security patrols. So there is a critical operations center that executes all the security functions, all the security operations within this building, within the one building that KCTP uses. Excuse me. And the building also has executive offices and a boardroom, utilized internally while rentable for additional income. Profitability boost with more interactions at KCTP building that could create additional opportunities. So I see this building, this one building, being near the visitors entrance, being near the car park, having these executive offices and boardrooms and small conference rooms that can bring people together, which means this can be a location within the science park that has a heavy amount of foot traffic, and traffic is good, especially for STP, as long as it's not overly done. And that is a snapshot of the building composition, which clearly says that this is a carefully determined distribution of space with high levels of flexibility and careful expansion aspirations, because tenants are free to adapt and change, and we've already seen that KCTP is designed in a way that it can be scaled further as and when required. That is an excellent strength for a science park to have. Next, we learn about what KCTP's, or at least what the pre-scene tells us about KCTP's service list is. So there is the service of transport for tenants. KCTP has a minibus and a driver that tenants can book to commute between the airport. It is a critical strength and adds to the fact that we have a proximity to a global transport hub, which can be a great strength. Transport General has its own subsidized bus service linking KCTP's campus to the university and capital city business district, another critical strength, because we've continuously seen that for STP to be successful, the accessibility factor is very, very important. Storage. Access to a campus computer network facility is available. So I'm thinking there is an internal local area network as well that is associated to this network facility and linked to a secure server, and there is an off-site hot backup. That is also a critical strength. So when you look at the P3 content, hopefully with Usama, you will learn about how the various types of backups that are used as a means of minimizing cyber security risk and in overall cyber risk management. So KCTP has an off-site hot backup. If something goes wrong in the internal servers within the internal system that is located in the KCTP space itself, things can go live through the hot backup site. The KCTP executive offices and boardroom can be hired by tenants when not being used by KCTP, which means there is more opportunity and another key strength. And they say that KCTP hosts some meetings and conferences at KCTP or at the hotels. Indicates commitment to bringing people together, and a track record must have made them highly experienced in setting up these conferences. So we are not a new business. We've been in this operation, we've been doing this for a very long time, which means by now we must be really good experts with a positive brand image and positive reputation and all the capabilities that are required to bring the right talent, right people together. I think we must have accumulated it by now. Many appreciate the fact that KCTP can provide these services for a fee. Of course, profitability must be maintained. So with that motive, these fees are not free. There is always that opportunity to charge a particular fee, and that must be taking up a small portion of our revenue line item in the P&L. Then we look at KCTP Business Services. There are flexible range of services and is usually expected in a STP. It is ideal for startups that are managed by technologists who have little interest in the administrative aspects of running a business. This provides a view on this type of tenants, and as a result, managing them better could be done with this understanding. And tenants can pay to subcontract aspects of their businesses, aspects such as bookkeeping, preparing tax returns, and human resources management. All of this can be offered under the KCTP, or are being offered currently under the KCTP Business Services banner. So what we can think of is, when you're doing the strategic analysis as well, what we can think of is under KCTP Business Services, if we were to expand the service range further, what are the different kinds of opportunities we can exploit? So with this, we clearly see additional revenue, but will also require additional staff and the right expertise and talented management or leadership to manage all this that is happening. And we have a director who undertakes KCTP Business Services as a primary responsibility as well. Then we have marketing and brand management, which is a most important element of managing a STP, plus the connection to the legal aspect is important, because we have a research park, and within that aspect we have tenants who come and who trust us and who trust in the privacy, who trust in the security offered by the science park, and that has a direct link to the reputation, which is why the legal aspect is very important. The marketing and brand management operation is staffed by one experienced manager and one administrative assistant. So I'm thinking, are 2 people enough? Maybe. I think 2 people can do a whole lot. I've actually learned this in the past 5 years of my career. So yet I'm thinking, we are a 970 people company. In such a situation, are 2 people purely enough for the marketing and brand management aspect? The key responsibilities under this are: 1, new customer acquisition. So maintaining the company's profile among potential tenants is critical to ensure that the reputation is retained, and then it feed forwards to the attraction of new tenants, because people talk. Then customer retention, also liaising with existing tenants to ensure their needs are known and understood to push for renewal of existing contracts. The data and information gathering aspect is critical, with analytics capabilities can help significantly. So given that we have so many tenants, given that we have been operating for such a long time period, we will have a lot of data, a lot of information, and we live in the information age, and we live in the age where data analytics, big data capabilities provide us that strength, provide us that, or enable us to harness the power of data and information. So I see an opportunity here of how customer behavior, customer related information, that data, the past trends, the past behavior of the tenants, of specific details of the tenants, can help us make better decisions so that we retain the customers, and it can also further provide us the necessary intelligence to attract new tenants as well. Next, we have a critical discussion or a critical look at KCTP security department. Due to the confidentiality aspect of tenants' work, KCTP undertakes detailed background checks on all of its staff. Classic risk point here. Because if the background check is not as detailed and if the background check is not as foolproof, then we can have risky elements coming into play. So this is definitely unavoidable and a necessary aspect of managing KCTP security, and this could be done through a section in the, or this is currently being done through a section in the security department. This team, whoever they are conducting these background checks, they must be experts. These checks are done on all new staff and on staff being promoted for sensitive roles, insisting on extensive pre-employment checks. There are references from previous employers that are checked, full employment histories and records are being checked, and for all of this, documentary evidence is also expected. Then we have a quick view on cybersecurity. The pre-scene says there are 2 specialists in cybersecurity to oversee and manage the security issues associated with managing the company's IT systems. So the moment I hear 2 specialists, I'm thinking how competent are they, and they must be very competent, given that we don't have a history of bad repute when it comes to cybersecurity, which the pre-scene doesn't indicate. But always be open-minded to the fact that the unseen couple of sentences, the story can drastically change. So here the scope of the IT systems is underplayed in the pre-scene. Can expect system integrity breach leading to cybersecurity risk. Any breach to the integrity of the system, any breach that can cause problems with the integrity of this IT system, may it be hacking, may it be critical failure, may it be server failure, may it be electrical power failure, we can have a problem. So cybersecurity is clearly a critical aspect, especially with modern capabilities of hackers and the variety of means available for illegal cyber system exploitation. So we have plenty of examples in this day and age of how cybersecurity is being challenged and compromised every single day. We have to be very careful about this. Moving on, the tenancy rental agreement. This is a critical document because the contract between the tenant and the landlord, in this case KCTP, that contract is being documented and is bound by this agreement, the tenancy rental agreement, which is a most critical business agreement related to the tenant relationship management aspect. We will definitely require expert legal teams to manage the agreements. Any loopholes can cause severe problems, but with KCTP's long time operation, we seem to have well managed this aspect. These agreements, the pre-scene says, these agreements are generally 12-month contracts. So it's fair, not too short, neither too long term, because both of these too short can cause problems for tenants, too long term can cause problems to us. So 1 year seems okay. Can be rolled forward indefinitely from year to year. So we see a flexibility and ease of continuity aspect incorporated. Tenants required to indicate intentions 6 months before the agreement end. Here we see a classic line within a tenancy rental agreement that exerts control and the risk management move by ensuring that we know what is going to happen 6 months before with respect to any tenant, because if a tenant tells us that they are going to be moving out, we have 6 months, plenty of time to find a new tenant. Tenants are required to make a substantial cash deposit before taking possession of the building and workspace. It is clearly a risk mitigation move. You can think about the TARA framework as well, and a liquidity retainer. It enhances our liquidity while also pushing the payable side, while also likely to push certain tenants away due to the inability to service the deposit. So the more substantial this cash deposit becomes, especially with smaller tenants and those of them who are very sensitive to the financial side of things, they might be hesitant to join or anchor themselves or come and stay at KCTP, use the KCTP rental space. The deposit is returned at the conclusion of the tenancy after settling all receivables and the restoration of the buildings or workspace to its original condition. So the deposit drastically reduces the aspect of damage control, because tenants, especially if they stay for a long time durations, and if their research is the kind of I wouldn't use the word demolition, but is the kind of heavy duty work, there can always be some damage caused to the building, and we have our deposit from that tenant. We can definitely take care of the building before we settle it back. So the contract closure control aspect is embedded within the agreement, and which is also very common to most rental agreements. I'm sure all of you are quite familiar with this clause. Now we will look at what controls does KCTP incorporate, because in the general explanation of things, we saw that science and technology parks exert or always try to exert some amount of control with their tenants, and with the KCTP description, the pre-scene provides us several indicators to different kinds of controls that KCTP has imposed, has enacted, has enabled to ensure that they have things under control. Here are a few, or rather this is the list that the pre-scene provides us. So KCTP insists that tenants keep the exteriors of respective buildings and surrounding area clean and tidy. So the tenant is responsible for the interior and the close exterior of the buildings. It is also linked to the deposit retainer for damage recovery during the contract closure. Tenants are required to restore the buildings to their original condition at the end of their tenancy. On top of all of this, on top of the deposit and on top of the deposit being used to ensure that any damages are settled, tenants are also given the responsibility to restore their buildings. So there is clear damage control while safeguarding the liquidity aspect by the deposit. Tenants must inform KCTP's health and safety department of all the equipment that will be used. So KCTP health and safety department is empowered to manage the health and safety of the park. Tenants must permit KCTP to carry out regular safety inspections. So it is important to ensure safety while it might cause some inconvenience. So especially if these safety inspections are unannounced. While the pre-scene doesn't tell us, it could be, but I don't think with a science and technology park unannounced visits are always necessary, only if we have some sort of doubt of what is really going on in the building. But other than that, because a tenant can actually get into a science and technology park and put the management in a position where they are unable to, the management or the security team are unable to look into the building. If the tenant insists on the confidentiality side, they might pitch a image saying that they don't trust anybody, they don't want anyone without authorization to access the building, and that can cause some trouble. So we don't really want any sort of blunders, but we also want to have that ability to carry out safety inspections. It is important to ensure safety while it might cause some inconvenience. So KCTP reserves the right to refuse installations and modifications. Here we see KCTP taking a move to exert significant control and requires pre-evaluation of KCTP's limits by the tenant, while also might lead certain tenants away. But there are pros and cons in this. It has to be carefully managed. The right to refuse installations and modifications. Tenants are free to make their own arrangements for data storage and communications. So on the positive side, that the fact that tenants are free to make their own arrangements, there is that flexibility for them and one less aspect to manage, so one less trouble. But on the negative side, letting tenants manage their own data and communication aspect, there is the risk of uncontrolled nodes to the STP network, because if these communication elements, these communication nodes are linked to the STP network and we don't have any control over them, that might be a potential cyber risk related concern. So in such case, there is always this pros and cons situation, and sometimes maybe Some tenants, very rarely, might insist on having control of their own storage and communications facilities. New tenants are vetted carefully, including rigorous financial checks. It is highly important, and if not conducted, it can cause a cash flow risk, but deposit mitigates this risk to a reasonable extent. And these are clearly the pre-scene provided controls for KCTP. But the thing is about the research, especially as you do the research, you realize science and technology parks have found their own ways to control their tenants, to manage their tenants beautifully, while advancing the progress of science and technology and innovation in the world. So there is always some additional room to think, and I hope that you put the research to good use to expand your thoughts on the various controls that a science and technology park can implement. That brings me to the final subsection within the detailed, the passage, the essay type presentation of KCTP. There are some example KCTP incidents in the pre-scene. So apparently at KCTP, some tenants install interior partition walls to provide separate spaces, which is up to tenants, okay. And also at KCTP, most install specialized equipment ranging from small air filters to small furnaces. KCTP seems to have a wide scope in adaptability. In addition to this, one tenant recently installed an industrial laser but was initially refused permission to proceed until the workspace was fitted with safety locks to prevent unauthorized entry during the operational hours. So it is conflict, but we see a situation where initially permission was refused, but then after things were taken care of, this conflict was resolved. There is another example where a tenant wished to replace a furnace used to create alloys with a larger model but was refused. So here again it was refused because this would have caused brownouts in the electrical supply to other buildings, resulting in massive inconveniences to other tenants. So in this example, there was a conflict and it wasn't resolved, it was refused. So we see a example where KCTP was compromising and allowed the tenant by giving them what they want. We also see a situation where KCTP didn't allow for what the tenant's wish was. So here the conflict was resolved, here the conflict created remained. And that brings me to the snap of KCTP's board of directors. As you can see, we have 4 executive directors: Sanjay Gupta, who is the CEO, Bill McDougall, Director Operations, Shireen, Director Finance, and Chloe Reynolds, Director HR. So Sanjay is obviously the executive leader of the company and is a recent appointment. Bill is in charge of IT maintenance, health and safety, landscaping and gardening, and marketing. Thinking, is there too much responsibility here? Shireen is a director finance, so accounting and finance, administration and legal, and Shireen is the director who is in charge of KCTP Business Services as well. So anything related to KCTP Business Services, we might get emails from Shireen. Chloe is, as the director HR, is in charge of staff recruitment, training and retention. So the pre-scene gives us a key summary of the experiences these individuals, these seemingly remarkable individuals carry. You can go through them. All the highlighted areas indicate very shortly and very concisely what the experience entails, and the positive means that it is a strength. And we see Bill McDougall, a small highlight, has been at KCTP since 2012, which is almost 8 years. So for 5 years as a senior IT manager at KCTP prior to the director promotion. So Bill seems to know KCTP very well. Then we have Chloe, who has been with us or with KCTP since 2015. Then we look at the non-executive directors. We have 5: Jules Milano, Jody Perrott, Rick Adamson, Rio Chang, and Professor Helga Krass. So the non-executive directors chaired by Jules Milano, and they are also they participate in the independent committees. Jules is sitting in all the independent committees. But corporate governance recommendation, I have to remind you that the chairman does not chair any of the main committees, especially risk and nomination and audit. Jody is a member of risk and nomination committee. Rick is a member of the audit and risk committee. Rio is a member of the audit and remuneration committee. And Professor Helga Kress, who is representing CCU, is a member of the remuneration and the nomination committee. And here we again have a quick highlight of all the experiences that the non-executive directors bring to the firm. So when you do the corporate governance analysis, especially in the revision of P3 content, where you learn about corporate governance, and then the corporate governance application, where you apply the P3 content that you learn to the pre-scene, do evaluate the corporate governance position with respect to the board balance aspect, with respect to the independent committee composition aspect, with respect to the effective experiences that are required to run a company's board effectively and competently. Do evaluate that position as well. And that is the snap of the KCTP Board of Directors. Next, we move to KCTP's risk register, the principal risks that have been identified in the pre-scene. So there are 5 key risk themes. The potential and the possible risk impact has been analyzed, and the risk mitigation actions that have been identified by the KCTP's risk management team ideally has been presented to us. Let's have a look. So the first risk theme that has been identified is security, and the risk impact, theft and vandalism, industrial espionage by competitors could be a security concern. To mitigate this risk, we have 24-hour security presence, vets all staff carefully. I'm thinking, do we only vet KCTP staff, or do we also vet the tenant staff? Is there some sort of verification that is important? Comprehensive insurance coverage for both injury and property damage is also available. So we see a risk transference move here. Then tenant turnover. The risk impact that has been identified is the ability to be a going concern and long-term survival for startups, especially in terms of the cash flow. Our tenants have to have the ability to continuously service the rent properly, on time even. The mitigation aspect is to have a mixture of tenants to ensure manageable turnover with unaffected cash flows by voids. So PLCs and what I mean is that product life cycle behavior, where we always say when it comes to product portfolio management, we always say that we need to maintain a mix, the right mix of products. If we have 2 products under development stage, we'd rather also have 3 products at the mature stage, and maybe at least a minimum 1 product or 2 products at the development stage as well. So maintaining a healthy mix in terms of product portfolio also applies in that same sort of logic when it comes to the tenant portfolio management. Then we have health and safety. The risk impact is that there can be hazardous processes and practices. We need technical expertise in this case to evaluate the extent of damage these processes and practices can cause, and also to ensure that we have a good idea of what is going on. So the risk mitigation or control activity that has been implemented is that tenants must inform KCTP about the activities for KCTP to take suitable safety procedures and permit tenants. We need to encourage for this risk. There is always that risk that tenants might not comply and inform us. There might be things, even a tenant who has already been with us for a long time might start doing little things And if they have maybe short-term projects that they have implemented that are risky, but if they have done these projects historically and they've got away with it, they are more likely to test and try and implement more projects like that. And someday, without KCTP knowing it, if something goes wrong, that would be a disaster. We have plenty of historical incidents in the world where those who were in charge didn't know what was going on. Especially even if you take the very unfortunate Chernobyl nuclear power plant incident, right? We clearly see a classic situation of people who commissioned the project not knowing what was going on, and this is nuclear we are talking about. So we definitely need to be very careful here. The IT aspect has been named as the fourth risk theme, critical, as we already discussed earlier. So the operations are being heavily dependent upon the availability of servers is identified as a key risk impact of the IT systems, which shows that there is a high level of dependency on IT capability. We have a remote hot backup site to take over in the event of the main site blacking out. So cyber risk management is an element here which you have to link very clearly to the P3 content aspect of cyber risk management. Then we have cyber security, which has been identified. Cyber security is ideally one part of cyber risk management as well. It's good that the company and the risk register identifies the IT aspect separately and cyber security separately, which is why even when we discussed it above, under security, I tried to extract cyber security as a separate element because it is critical. Tenants seem to file confidential information regularly about products and processes, etc. There is intellectual property, privacy, regulatory risk, reputation, brand, and customer flight. Yeah, and so many things that associate itself to the cybersecurity aspect. Risk mitigation moves. We have secure servers, which are critical. Strong cybersecurity to prevent hackers. More details are required about what kind of, because there are different kinds of hackers. You will learn in P3 there are white hat hackers, brown hat, black hat hackers. So we have to be very careful with how managing hacking incidents. There are different aspects, different ways, practical aspects. Even using social media, hacking can happen. So we have to have strong cybersecurity. Without additional detail, purely just saying strong cybersecurity doesn't solve anything. We need to understand what has been taken specifically to ensure strong cybersecurity levels. So do revise the P3 content effectively with respect to cybersecurity controls. And all staff, again I'm thinking, is it only just KCTP, or when they say all staff, is it KCTP and tenant staff vetted before granting system access to prevent attempts at accessing tenants' data? So in this case, we see KCTP staff being clearly verified and vetted before they have system access. That is the commentary based evaluation of the principal risk register of KCTP. You know, in the activity analysis sheet, there is a question that says identify any risks that you think are important and you think that haven't been identified in the principal risk register. So area to ponder about. And that brings me to the KCTP share price snapshot. Just looking at the image, and it's a 5-year share price image. It has been stable over the past 5 years, indicates positively held investor sentiment while not optimistic because price hasn't grown over the past 5 years. But in contrast, if you look at the Tesla share price here, you will notice this massive hike. So we clearly see a difference between KCTP's movement and Tesla's movement. Why would a share price grow or behave like this? And why would a share price behave like this? Things to think about, right? There might be a connection to the massive dividend payout that we are paying, and ideally you will learn more about it and you will get to think more about it in the financials review, if not already. But the idea is this: for the strategic case study, we have to try and understand how our shareholders think to the maximum possible extent. So we don't want to certainly with high levels of certainty assume and presume that our shareholders are this. No, but we should be able to trigger our mind to think about what kind of shareholders might we be having, and that sort of indication, that general indication, is denoted here. And of course you can use the from your F3 knowledge, you can apply your efficient market hypothesis knowledge to say whether we have a semi-strong market or a strong market, and use those assumptions also to come up with various thoughts about how and why the share price is behaving. Does it reflect all the information that is available? Does it reflect all the information that is historically available? Various forms of market can be thought. So if you look at the share price, there has been dips during August and September 2016 and July, August 2019. I'm talking about these two incidents. But it doesn't seem to be a major problem. There has been a peak somewhere around March and April 2018 at about $15.1. I'm talking about this particular point, this point. Again, not a major indicator. As of 30th September 2020, it is at an estimated $14.1, not very different from where they started 5 years ago. So we see the price here and here, so very close to where they started. The graph roughly indicates that the owners do not make much from capital gains, leads to an assumption that dividend payouts are a key expectation fulfilled to retain investor confidence. Yeah. On that note, we move to the final stage of the pre-scene analysis, and obviously the pre-scene itself, the news stories summary. So every pre-scene at the last, as the last section, as the last segment of the pre-scene document, we always get a few news stories and at times even blog posts. So this time we only have news stories. A summary, the one page or the heavy word passage and essay model news has been summarized for you. I will be already, the summary is available for you. I will be quickly going through the rough idea using the highlighted aspects here. So the first news item says universities focus on knowledge exchange. So the concept of knowledge exchange, which refers to the transferring of results from research studies to business activities, has been of focus in this news item. It just says that university promotion boards are increasingly looking at whether at least some findings of learned papers written have a demonstrable application to the real world. So when you read the news item, you realize that historically we see a trend of academic institutions promoting papers that have a very theoretically advanced and well researched content. But nowadays, this news item says that nowadays, in terms of promotion, in terms of recognition, universities are more and more looking for application based research rather than purely theoretical research. The second news item says that top scientists cannot build their own inventions, and there is this very beautiful analogy that has been used by the news itself, but I have summarized this for you. They're saying that while there are scientists, while there are researchers who conduct heavy duty research, they are only specialized in developing that research, in conducting that research. Transforming that research into a utilizable product format, that is not a skill that many top scientists have. In actuality, most leading scientists readily admit that they would not know how to operate the equipment in the factories that they supply with inventions. So in real life, the laboratory researchers and engineers will have to email the designs to a local factory to develop the actual working prototype. So in movies, if I take a moment and if I tell you, you will notice that in movies, especially if you think about movies like the Mission Impossible series, you will notice that once they do some sort of research or once they come up with some sort of scientific research, then you see that the hero asks the researcher, how long will it take? And the researcher says, look, it's going to take 10 hours, it's going to take 24 hours, it's going to take 48 hours for it to get ready. And that time frame is what they mean here. From the research point, somebody somewhere, someone who has the capability has to convert that research aspect into something that is utilizable for the, in this case, hero of the movie to go and do his or her thing. The third news item that we see is on simulation, which is now very popular. There has been a noted increase in the demand for developers of computer simulations. So they give us a traditional approach to how prototypes were built, but nowadays software is used for design and then tested by running the software through different simulations that mimic actual scenarios. So back in the day, a lot of practical on hand, on the ground work had to be done. Now most of these things in the initial design and development stage can be done as computer simulations. The fourth news item is about how 3D printers are now gaining massive popularity. So modern 3D printing technology can create relatively large objects and also can use a range of materials such as carbon fiber and even metal. So we even have recently seen incidents where even in countries like China, 3D printing has been used to design and print buildings, spaces of buildings themselves. So if 3D printing is gaining that amount of popularity, it is one area that we will have a lot of use for. Not in now one thing I noticed is the moment students see a pre-scene like this, everybody's thinking, look, 3D printing is going to be very important here, but not in a sense that a STP will be into 3D printing research, but it is really more about the fact that a tenant might need that technology and a tenant might even be using that technology. And for us, whether we have the capability of having that technology installed in our building, in our spaces, so that a tenant could use, that is one angle 3D printing can be useful for a science and technology park. And the fifth news item is about quantum mechanics, where the analog or the digital, apologies, it's really digital, this binary model of computing, yes and no, or 1 and 0, black and white, that model of computing has very limited capability. And the news item says that quantum mechanics, this particular science, draws on complex phenomena at a molecular level that allows computers to model uncertainties that cannot be addressed using conventional means. So what digital computers cannot do, like weather forecasting or climate change analysis, quantum computing can do. A quantum computer would try every possible combination at once and open a file instantly that in traditional digital models we use something called brute force attack. Right? There is a method of decryption called brute force attack, which can take very long time durations because one key is attempted at one particular time. That can be eliminated and all the potential combinations can be tried at once in a matter of seconds by quantum mechanics. That is the fifth news item. And the sixth one is titled How Green is the Cloud? So the idea is, in this news item, some researchers at CCU, they have discovered that users underestimate the electrical consumption required by cloud-based computing services. So they say that there is this element of data transmission between the device and the data center that consumes considerable levels of energy. And they're not saying that, or the researchers do not argue that the cloud is inefficient, but that the energy savings associated with the use of cloud are overstated, and that corporate disclosures on energy conservation associated to cloud service usage may exclude the impact of the third-party service providers working on the client's behalf. So it's not necessarily that cloud is bad, but more that cloud hasn't, or the impact of whether the complete analysis of how green the cloud is has so far been understated. Or in terms of benefits, it's actually not understated but overstated, right? How beneficial the cloud is. Currently, we all assume that it is so beneficial, but we have forgotten, or we have been ignorant about the electricity transmission, the data transmission aspect of electricity consumption. And that is the 6th news item, and that brings me to the end of the pre-seen complete summary with the commentary document. And that brings me to the end of the second segment associated to analyzing the pre-seen itself using my summary document. You are the senior finance manager of KCTP. You have a large amount of responsibility. You are reporting on special projects, and now with this exercise, you understand this business very well. You know this business inside out. You know how this industry works. Add to it the research information, the research related intelligence. You are extremely thorough with how a science and technology park works, how Adviland is, whether it's useful, whether it's not, and how KCTP as a business works. So you can very confidently move on to the next stage of preparing for the strategic case study exam with AZB. Thank you very much, ladies and gentlemen. I hope this has been a very fruitful exercise. I hope you make the best use of this. Until we see each other in the next segment or meet in a live session, thank you very much and good luck.